So tonight, like I said, we're going to go over the next project. The next project is making a planting vessel or a planter using the Revolve tool. And we're also going to talk about 3D printing this with supports, because these can be different shapes or larger forms. You might need to use supports to print these, because they don't just print flat on the table or your print bed. So let me switch over to Fusion. Or first off, let's go over the assignment. That helps more. So the project is, you're going to design a round vessel large enough for a small potted plant. Obviously, you don't have to put a plant in it, but I was actually planning on bringing some stuff and you can throw it in a pot. So anyway, but specifically using the Revolve tool. Also, this must also include a drainage dish. So this is not just a one body project. So we'll be going through the initial stuff in class. Obviously, as we're about to do. Main things project focuses on is on. Okay, we'll ignore that part. The due date is multiple component creation. We briefly discussed components before, but for the most part, we've just been working on the one so far. Remember, the components are the, I won't say highest of hierarchy in your browser tree, but a component can contain sketches, bodies, joints, all manner of other things, and you can have multiple components within a component, but we're not going to bother with that right now. But I'm going to show you how to create multiple components and how to work back and forth between those. We've already used in the sketch environment lines and fit point spline curves and such, but we're going to show a different way of using those. Making sure to use clothesline to create a profile, and we'll be using the Revolve tool to take that pattern and revolve it around. Some people like to call it the lathe tool, basically, whereas instead we used a flat sketch design on, say, the XY axis and extruded it in one straight direction, straight up in the Z axis. In this case, we're going to create a sketch, or rather half of a sketch, on the XZ plane, and then revolve that around the Z axis rather, and to use that to create a hollow form. We can of course manipulate it from there. We're going to use a circle pattern to create copies of a sketch or body feature around a chosen axis to point in multiples. So what that means is we're going to use the circular pattern tool to then, after the form is created, to make holes, and instead of having to place each one and all that sort of stuff, we're going to make one, finish it, and use a tool with it on Fusion to make multiples and let the program do the work for us. We'll use the extrude tool also to cut through the vessel, and we'll also start to play with using the appearance tools, which is toggling between appearance and auto appearance mode, which is shift in, shift November, and the appearance tool Apple. These allow you to shift between Fusion auto assigning colors to help you keep separate components visually separate in your workspace. And appearance tool is for actually applying intended material traits onto the thing. So you want it to look like a terracotta stone? Great. You want it to look like a golden planter? Awesome. That works too. So model requirements. It must be made of 2 components. Your main vessel and your drip tray. You're very welcome to make more if you like, but those are the base requirements. It must be large enough to house a small plant. We're going with something like, for the vessel, like 120 millimeters tall or wide and 100 deep. Play around with those. That's not huge, but roughly that. We're going with, like, something for like a little seedling. I recommend a wall thickness of about 3 to 5 millimeters. We're going to show you how to do that, but really anything thinner than 3, it starts to get a little bit floppy. Anything thicker is just overkill. But I can also show you how to make hollow walls. Must have drainage holes. The number of them and the design, totally up to you. Make the whole thing a perforated hole, just a perforated thing, more like a basket, like an orchid planter. Great, that works. But at least it has to have some sort of drainage. Otherwise, you just made a cup, which, okay, it's a cup. And the appearance tool is optional. You are welcome to apply appearances, but in this case, it's not a requirement yet. Finished model uploaded to our team folder. Obviously, we're ignoring the, I forgot to take this off of the actual assignment page. Yeah, it's not due tonight, because that's tonight. And then due next week. Well, we're not meeting next week, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyhow, Let's swap over to Fusion and show you just what I'm talking about. So in the next model here, and the next model is in the next assignment folder. And I started a simple one here. And right now it's in the default appearance mode. Default appearance is this shiny metal, it's steel. That's what it generally looks at. If you press and hold, if you're on a if you're on Windows, press and hold Shift and press in November, it switches colors. If you're on Mac, I think it's Command in. But what this is showing you is if you look on your browser tree here, I've already created two components here, one for the planter, one for the dish, and those are just automatically assigning different colors so you can visually tell them apart. That's all. That has no bearing on the actual finished model, on exporting it into a 3D printer, on the filament choice, has nothing to do with any of that. This is merely a visual representation. As I orbit around this, you can see, let me hide the dish. You can see that in this case, it is a cup, basically with a foot, and I have used the circle pattern tool to create holes in the bottom. I chose 5 because odd numbers are always satisfying to me for whatever reason. Stepping back on the history slider here, let me snap back. First, I started with creating sketches. I started with creating the components themselves. Up above the assemble dropdown is the new component dropdown. Mouse over that, and it will show you it creates a new component. Remember that the default at the browser tree here is a single cube. But once you start adding more components, which is still a single cube, if there are multiple components within that component, in this case, the main browser tree, the icon changes to this little stack of components, which is the icon up here over the over a symbol. That's all it is. So remember, a component can contain sketches, other components, locations, whatever have you. It's just a thing that holds other things. That's pretty much it. So I started by creating components. You can start your model and separate them into components later. That is totally up to you. That's not really, in this case, not a right or wrong way to do it, simply a choice. In the future, as you make more complex models, it's probably a better course of action to create your components, your separate components first, and then change things over. Create your separate components and make each thing in its own respective component. In the future, I'm going to show you in other projects where it makes more sense to create some of the sketches outside either, because it's going to share, your two different components are going to share those sketches. And in that case, you would make the sketches outside. So it's always going to depend on what you're doing, what might be the best course of action. So again, in this case, pardon me, I created both the components first, just the components, then I started creating sketches. First, I created the sketch. Let me expand this, expand this. I like to create a bounding box. So like I said, I was working on the XZ axis. So X red, left, right, Z blue, straight up and down. What I did for this, and I will open up the component here, or sorry, open up the sketch. I just established half of my sketch, and I'll show you why I did this. I made this 100 millimeters tall and 60 millimeters wide because the overall is 100 by 120. I only need half of a sketch. Finish sketch, go to the next. From there, I created a sketch outside, or since that one sketch is outside of my components, I started the next one within the first component, the planter. Open up, unhide, and I made half of a profile. So this is just a sketch showing close sketch because it's highlighted blue. It gills out a little bit, but that's okay. They're very basic. We can add more to this in a minute, which we will. I took that closed sketch, finished it up. In this case, actually, because I was just streamlining this, I went ahead and made my half a sketch for what will be my dish. But I made these within these separate components, or rather within their respective components. To do that, you have to make sure by default, the full project is active. When I mouse over the very top, on the right hand of this bar, this little dot with or this little circle, the dot inside, that shows active. That right now means the entire project is active. if I want to work just within one component or the other, as I mouse over the component icon, that little circle appears. I click there. Now only that is active. However, the other component is visible because it's still visible. Remember, Fusion will act on anything that is visible. If I don't want it to act on at all, hide it. But from there, I took that sketch using the Revolve tool, mousing over. It takes a sketch and revolves it around revolves it around an axis. That doesn't mean it has to be on that axis, but revolves around it. Ooh, tongue tied. Take that, bam, instant form. It took that half a sketch, rotated around 360. You don't have to revolve at 360. You can play with this. I bring up the toolbox here. You have your profile, which I selected, and I made this in two sections, just the cup itself, and then I added a foot. Those are the same sketch. You select an axis. In this case, it's the actual origin Z-axis. And then you can play around with this stuff. You want it to be partial, maybe do 180, half a cup. You can have half a cup of tea, you Mad Hatter. Sorry, I can't. It's always stuck in my head. You were right not to laugh at that. You should not laugh. That wasn't even a good reference. But you can play around with these settings. Your standard is full. It's going to go 360. If you want less, you can switch it to partial. Or if you're creating against something, you could create it with two object. You as always also have your actual slider. You could do this by hand. So you can just make partials. But in this case, we're going to do a complete. So go to full. New body, that's all fine. Okay, there we go. Next thing I did is, because I already had the sketch for the dish, I did the same thing for the dish. Actually, in this case, for next thing I did, it wasn't make the dish, but make the holes. What I did is I made a new sketch. Sorry, get confused with what I'm doing. If I zoom down here, made a new sketch. Actually, I did this on the bottom. Now, you can take two paths here. You can make your sketch, use the circular pattern tool, which is under create, pattern, circle pattern. You can either make your sketch, finish the sketch, make multiples of that and then extrude through, or like I did, make the one sketch, use the extrude tool to cut through. Then I added some fillets. Remember, it's fillet, not fillet. Fillet is a fish. Fillet is an architectural term. Made roundovers. Then I used the pattern tool to create multiples of the completed feature. So I didn't have to go back and do it for each one or anything like that. Now, you don't have to make each one for each one. You can select all of them and then add the fillet tool, stuff like that. So it's not like you need a multitude of fillet tools, but there we go. That's pretty much it. From there, then I went ahead and did the same for the overall sketch. Now, right now, it's not showing any other stuff. I know I did the dish. It's literally right there because I only have the planter currently active. So it is only showing actions for that component. If I either activate the whole project, now all of my tools come back and all that such. Or I could just go just to the dish and you can see it isolate just the parts for that. Let me hide the planter. For the dish, it's simply taking that, making that sketch profile and using the Revolve tool to make it a 360 object. So that's essentially the project. Obviously, we're going to go into some more details on how to make more features for this, because like, if nothing else, put this in a tray, and right now, yeah, it has drainage holes. That can't go anywhere. It's just going to bubble underneath there. So I'm going to show you how to make also like paths through there so the water would actually drain out and away from the dish instead of just get trapped on the dish, that sort of thing. So those are the only requirements. You can see why I made that bounding box there. It gives me personally a frame of reference. You don't have to make that. I like doing that. That's just how I prefer to work. So let's take a pause. We'll come back and have at this. All right. So that's the basic rundown. Let's do an actual walkthrough. So obviously start a new project. And as always, or at least best recommendation, save immediately. So I'm going to save. Example, maybe if I can spell. in class planter vessel, whatever. I can partially spell. That works. Great. And again, that is in our class folder or for the appropriate folder. Make sure it's in there, then save. Okay. So like I said, first things first, I like to start with either starting by adding my components or with the bounding box sketch. So since one of the main things for the project is multiple components, let's do that. So first thing, there's nothing wrong with creating everything just as you normally would, but just to get in the habit of starting with stuff like this, I'm going to start with making my components. I go over to the assemble tool, drop down. First thing is new component, or is one of the default tools up top. Hit there, and I'll go ahead and label them at the start. Planter, geez, dumb fingers. Start there. All right. Now, one quick thing to check, and I could have fixed this in the box, but I forgot to say so. When you start a new component, it will automatically become the active component. So if I now went immediately created a new component, let's just say test, it made that component within the new component I just created that's inside the component tree for the whole project. So just to make it extremely confusing, don't do that. So let's delete that. I don't need that new component. I can right click on there, delete. There we are. So now I have reactivated the whole project. Little mouse over the top bar, select the feature. Now the whole project is active. Start new component. If you look at the bottom of the toolbox, there's a checkbox. Deselect activate, and it won't activate that component immediately. So that's all you need to do. So with that, geez, we'll just say tray. All right. And automatically, since I am still in auto assign, you can see on the time slider here, 2 new component pieces. Those are all have this pink bar above. That's because the default color for this, the auto assign default color for this whole project is pink. Each component, one's yellow, one's green. That's all that means. All right, so I have the main component the main project active. Now I'm going to make my little bounding box. Start a sketch. In this case, I'm going to select the XZ axis. So red and blue, like I'm working right in front of myself. All right. So in this case, I do not want to use a center rectangle because I don't need a full 100 by 120. I need 100 by 60, half of that, because I'm only creating half of the profile sketch. So I'm going to use a 2-point rectangle. Start right at the origin. Select outward. Now you can drag this out. Remember, you can kind of play around with it, whatever, or you can enter it numerically immediately, or I can just sit there and say, oh crap, you know what? I wanted it something different. I will go to my dimension bar, select there, draw up. All right, that one's only 60. Hit there. Same on this side. Oh, that was actually 100. Cool. There we go. So right there. But as was said before, you want this to be a construction line. So hit escape. Double click a side. Just if you select just once or in the middle, it'll turn that all. But I want just the edge here. Double click on one of the edges. You can either hit X or go over to the construction or the toolbox here and press construction. Turns into the dotted line. Okay, that's it. That's all I need for this first sketch. Now, hit finish sketch. This sketch exists outside of my 2 main components. It's on the main browser tree here. It is outside of either of these. Now I want to start making my vessel and my tray. To do that, I'm going to activate each component respectively. So I'm going to make the planter. I'm going to go activate the planter component. Now you see that my sketch kind of ghosted out here. It's still present, it's still visible, but it's not on the currently active plane or the active project. So in this case, new component, same XZ axis. It'll slip to the front. Great. Now, at this part, frankly, you can make this however you please. If you want this to be round, if you want this to be organic, if you want this to be angular, does not matter. You can use this. You can use a sketch line, continuous, play around with that. Fit point spline. You could start with an object, trim and chop it up, however you like. In this case, I'm going to start with a fit point spline, and we'll modify from there. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm just going to start at the origin point because it makes sense. Now you can immediately start going up, down, and around. Remember that between 2 points, even if it's curved line, between 2 points is a straight line. It's not to the next, to the 3rd point that it starts to curve. So, I don't know, something like that ish. All right, let's draw up. Now it's going to start curving on me. Super freaking duper. I can draw outward from here. There we are. Hit enter. Remember, you have your control points and you have your handlebars. You can play around with those as you please. Drag that around. Click there. Mess with my handlebars. Make something really funky, which is going to be horrible for a plant, so maybe not. Control Z that. Something that-ish. Sure. Now, I can draw a second line for that, but I don't want to deal with that. That's the whole point of working with CAD. I'm going to use the offset tool. Go over to modify, offset, select that line, and this is where you could either positive or negative, inside or outside. Or the offset makes a dimensional curve based off of the original. So in this case, I want it 3 millimeters. Like I was saying, 3 to 5, that's plenty. Less gets a little floppy, more is just overkill. All right, there we go. Easy peasy. Now, this is still an open sketch. Oh, actually, I forgot. Let me close this thing here, just letting everybody know that you might have some access outages on Saturday, this upcoming Saturday. So let me close that so don't have this orange bar over the screen the whole time. All right. So right now, this is an open sketch, meaning that these two sketch lines exist, but for the Revolve tool to work, it has to work on a closed sketch. So I need a way to close this. So I have some different options. Down at the bottom here, I just want to use a straight line. And with this, don't connect the two. I want to go straight up 90 degrees. 90 degrees, definitely straight up. Doesn't matter if I go too far. Because how this is going to work, oops, I didn't want that one, delete that. How this is going to work is we're going to revolve around that center axis. And my sketch rests on that center axis, the Z axis. If I taper away from it or something, you're going to end up with some weird points and such. So instead of drawing the line between the two endpoints, I'm going to use now the extend tool. So just mouse over that. It assumes it wants to extend to the next available line. Boop, there we go. Much better. And I can trim off that excess if I need. Don't necessarily need to, but in this case, we will. All right. Hit F6 to resize. Now I want to do something about the top. Now I have some options. I can just draw a straight line from here. All right. That closes the sketch. It's now solid blue, or now it's blue inside. We're all set. Now I can modify this. I could either say I want to add some fillets here. Now I will warn you, I have found some issues with adding fillets right now. Now, if you want these to be even, before you hit enter, select the next set and it'll continue. They're both going to be the same. One. Now I can modify this, and this is where it gets weird. So I've run into issues doing this, and I have found that it does the same thing whether or not I'm entering numerically or by the slider. So right now, I would say if you want to curve this edge, go with a different option. Either, let me Control Z out of that, don't use the fillet now, but use the fillet once it's a revolved body, or instead of this line, actually, let me just switch that to a control or a construction line for now. The other option would be if I want that to be like an even circle, I would go with using a 2-point circle. So open up the circle, drop down, go over to 2-point, and draw from here to here. And that's just still construction. I should have turned that off. Now I have a rounded edge. So I could either make a circle here, and now I have a rounded edge to revolve around, or when I revolve the object with a sharp angle with a just flat edge, then I can add a fillet to the actual complete edge of the body rather than the sketch. Doesn't matter. It's up to you. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and swap this around. I'll leave this as a construction line for now, but I'm going to use this as a flat edge, and then I'll show you how to apply the fillet afterwards. Resize. Okay, there we go. Finished sketch. There we go. Done. All right, that's a body. There's my sketch. Let's save. Planter profile or Priffle. Great. So the basics of this project is now the Revolve tool. So that's the next one over from the default. Next one over from Extrude. Mouse over, as it says. Makes a sketch profile, a planner face, or revolves it around a selected axis. You can do some weird stuff with this, but we're just going to do kind of a basic one first. So activate that. Profile was already selected, but let's clear all that out. Select profile, close profile. There we go. If you chose to add a circle there, make sure you've selected the circle as well. If you didn't make any trims, you want to make sure you got both of that. Now, axis, select the Z axis. Bam. Automatically creates that form. All right, I'm going to leave it as new body, 360 degrees, extent, all that fun. Now I've created a vessel form that would easily topple over and has no holes. So I've made an instantly scalding teacup. Great. We'll make teacups and such later. But right now I would like a foot on this so it in fact does not fall over. So I can either start a new sketch or go back, edit the first sketch. All right, edit sketch, and I'm just going to add to this. You can tweak this all you want, keep going back and forth, that's fine. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little bit of a foot. Now, the example one, I made a solid foot. That's kind of chunky. Let's make something more elegant. So in this case, I'm going to use another fit point spline. Just start somewhere and make kind of a little bit of a roundy foot. Super duper. Same deal. That looks fine. I'll use the offset tool again. I'm going to go the opposite direction. So we'll say -3 goes down to there. Obviously, it gets way bigger. That's fine. And I still need to close this. All right. Straight line. Beep, boppity boop. Right across. That closes it. Let's trim some chunks off. Use a trim tool. Chop, chop, choppity chop. I don't need to trim this away. That's really unnecessary, but I will have to add a selection to the profile when I finish. Now, right now, I have a few options. I can add a fillet in here because this would technically create a very problematic point, but I can also add these features afterwards. So it really depends on if this runs into any problems. Like you saw when I was adding fillets to the top here, it really distorted everything because it was my two edges were based off of an offset, and those built-in constraints can conflict with one another. So in this case, I'm going to add my fillets, my curves afterwards. Okay. Finish sketch. It didn't add anything yet because now I need to go back, modify the revolve, edit feature, and just on profile, also select that. Boop, there we go. Now, kind of a chunky base. That's fine. Let's add some features to it. Now, I want to add the features to it first because I don't want my holes that I'm going to cut into it to interfere. So first, I'm going to make some rounds. Let's add some fillets to this to make it pretty. So we haven't really officially talked about the fillet tool, especially on a body yet. Fillet tool is for rounding over corners. But the fillet tool, when you're working on a full body, has two different settings. Actually, has several. But we're going to stick with the main fillet or full round fillet. So regular fillet, I can select just the edge. And let's say that's only 1 millimeter thick. So let's say 1 millimeter, or it's only 3. So I round that over. I can just select that inner edge. Or I can add another edge, or for that matter, actually, let me deselect that and select both of those edges at once. Now when I push 1, now it rounds both of those corners off. Cool. Frankly, because it's a full face, I can select the full face, press 1, and it's going to do the exact same thing because it's on either edge of that face. That's a shared face. But what if I want that to actually be completely round? Well, let me clear that selection out, go up to type, drop down to full fillet, full round fillet, see if this works. Doesn't always work on curved edges. In this case, okay, yeah, see, it's going to select some weird stuff. Okay, it actually worked. Great. Now there's no flat spot between. It assumed the correct radius for the fillet and created this lip completely round. So if you want things to be fully round in that case, same thing like on the previous project, you're making your keychain badges. If you selected full round on the edge, rather than it being 2 partial rounds, so in this case, rather than figures. Come on, Butterfingers. So you have your straight corner. If you added fillets to either end or either side, you would probably end up with this odd flat face. But on full round, does exactly what it says. Adds a bit more radius to that fillet and creates one solid curvature. So that works really nicely. But I want to also make sure that didn't do that anywhere else. Orbit round? Nope. Good. Okay, cool. So You can continue to add fillets here by using the plus tool, the add selection, or you can finish, start another fillet. Sometimes, depending on what you're doing, adding fillets within the same tool is better. Sometimes when you have more different types of fillets, it is best to create multiple fillet tools. So in this case, I'm going to deselect full round. I just want the regular fillet. That's one of the things I want to do now is I want to adjust the curvature of these transition points, mainly the outside here, select there. I'm just going to drag it out until I like it. Ooh, way too much. So you can actually just keep going and you'll end up with something like straight. So why bother? Why did I even bother with the curve? You can really go nuts with this. We'll do something slightly lesser. 6 seems decent enough. Now I'll add, well, you know what? No, I'll go ahead and just do the 1. Come on, where'd it go? Yep. Nope, yep. Ah. Just the 1. No, stop that. Just the edge. Dang nabbit. Oh, because it keeps defaulting over to full round. I didn't see it do that. There we go. And what was it? 6? Yeah, nice. Okay. Remember, if I right click, I can bring up the recently used tool. Just go straight up, repeat fillet. Now this time what I'm trying to do is I want to round this out because sharp corners, especially deep sharp corners, creates a pinch point. Remember, we're creating something, if we 3D print this, layer by layer. So if you have multiple layers that convene on one sharp little point, it creates both a weak point because there's fewer layers for it to glue to, there's less surface, and smoother transitions just are structurally stronger. So I'm just going to create a fillet here, just drag this out a little bit. Doesn't need to be huge, but something enough to where it at least smooths it out a little bit. That's significantly better. Okay, cool. You can round this out as well if you really want. No problem there. Sure. We'll go one more full round fillet, see if it selects it. There we go. Nice and roundy bottom. Now, one thing about using a full round on the bottom, remember that this is going to be printing flat on the print bed. They don't do as well with round things with a very minimum contact point. So in this case, I actually would want to not use the full round and instead use 2 edge fillets, say like 1. So I actually do in fact have that flat spot. That will make for a stronger contact point. And in fact, might actually shrink the fillet a little bit to half. So I'm going to say 0.5 millimeters. So it's a little bit flatter, a little bit wider. It just makes for a better contact point for making contact with the print bed. So just thinking ahead a little bit. Okay, now snazzy, I added some features. Those are just structural points to make it a little bit better, a little bit stronger, a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer of a print. That's all. Okay, so I'll save. Fillets added. I just realized I spelled that fillets. So we'll see how that translates to when I go print that. That might just be foreshadowing. Awesome. All right. Next thing is you need to have drainage holes in this. Otherwise, it's just a cup that will definitely kill a plant. So with this, I'm going to create a new sketch. But instead of working on the XY or the XZ plane, I'm going to work from below, but still on the XZ plane. So tabletop, just looking at it from underneath. So I'm going to select a plane. That works there. So now it automatically moves the object like I'm looking straight up at it. Cool. In this case, I'm just going to make a circle. Nothing fancy. If you want to make something fancy, more power to you. I'm going to use a center point circle, and I'm going to put this on the major axis. It makes it so much easier if you start something that you're planning to use like the circle pattern with, make multiples, start on a major axis. That way you have a reliable starting point. If you just kind of put it willy-nilly, in this case, it's not really a problem. In the future, more complex models, it might become, I won't say problematic. It's more of that it just can create unexpected and unnecessary issues. Whereas if you're going to make multiples of it anyway, put one on a major axis and it just simplifies things. So the reason I added those fillets and such first, so I would need to put a hole here, but I want to make sure this hole is not too large or going to interfere with those fillets, those curvatures. So that's why I'm making this after the fact. And I can see where it's going to be. All right, 8 might be a little overkill. 5 millimeters usually seems like a good size, but I don't know, 5 to 10, somewhere in there. 10's probably a little bit large unless you're using like really coarse soil. So I don't know, 5 seemed reasonable, maybe 6. I mean, that's really, we're literally talking about 1 millimeter difference, so it wouldn't really matter. Okay. So you have a couple of options here. Great, I made a circle. Hooray. Now I can use a circle pattern here, which on mine is default. Go to create circle pattern. This is in the sketch space though. I don't want to make more unnecessary tool actions than I have to. So I'm just going to make the one circle. Select, create, or finish sketch. Great. Now I'm going to use the extrude tool. I'm going to select that profile and I'm going to drag it upwards. I can drag it upwards, and because it's going through a body, it automatically changes operation to cut. But like I said, what if I want to change things? This is me personally. I don't like to use just arbitrary drags, arbitrary, unnecessarily large amounts. So instead of by distance, I'm going to change the extent type to object, and I'm just going to select the inside edge, the inside face of my form. Now it's going to cut only right to there, meaning that also if I decide to go back and you know what, I need to make this bowl thicker. I didn't think I was going to need it this thick or as thick, make it thicker. Now it will always recalculate to the thickness of the form, of the bowl. Easy peasy. All right, great. Why did it not cut through? What the deuce? Oh, all right. So here we go. Here's an issue that I didn't expect. My original sketch dipped below the actual profile plane. So let me go back, edit the first original sketch. As I look back here, see how this dips below the x-axis? My circle is right here between those two. So my circle started on the x-axis, so it did not affect this spot. So I got two options. I can go back to that extrusion and make it go 2 directions and also cut downward, or it's gonna be a lot better if I fix this right here. Easiest way to fix this, draw a straight line across the axis. Straight line, starting right at the point there, go straight across the axis to where the x-axis meets my point. When I get close, my cursor is going to switch to an X, and it's going to kind of snap and stick there a little bit. Great. That's all I need. I might have to change, fix my my revolve, but now when I mouse over that, you see how it only highlights part of that? Much better. Honestly, this kind of divot here in the center, it could be better without, but it's not really causing a problem. So finish sketch. Now that's still part of it. So now I need to go and adjust that revolve. So right click, edit feature, and just deselect, which means selecting that little chunk there. Now it's flat at the bottom. Recalculates. Okay, cool. That actually works pretty nicely and kind of works in a double effect. One, I'm going to get a better bond to the print bed when I go to print this. So flat bottom works really well. Also, my hole here isn't on this flat spot. It's kind of in the spot in between. That's actually pretty helpful. Because now any water draining out wouldn't get stuck underneath this. Cool. All right. So now I'm going to add a couple of features to this. I'm going to go and add a fillet. Let's just cut, instead of going edge by edge by edge, I'm just going to select the inside surface. And let's say, I don't know, 0.5. Now it's going to apply a fillet to the edges down here, as well as inside. Great. Now I've completed that one hole. Now, since that's complete with the features and everything, now let me go to create pattern, circle pattern. And now I'm going to make multiples of that completed feature. So go to object type, not bodies, actually features. Hopefully this works. Sometimes it doesn't work on the inside. So I'm going to use a selection box going from the left, drag over. Should select everything, but it didn't. So pooper. All right. So sometimes it doesn't. So now I just got to go through and select each of those. Make sure you got all the features. All right. They're all blue highlighted. Great. Now, select axis. It's hard to see sometimes. If you have trouble seeing through an object, you can temporarily just hide that body so I can see the z-axis. There we go. Now you see it's automatically making multiples of that feature. Unhide it. Now you can see it all again. Toggle the hide the bodies, and sometimes easier. All right. 3, like I said, more, 5, 7, not 57. That's a bit excessive. We'll go with All right, there we go. When I finish, now it completely recalculates, does all of those same actions to each of those holes, makes a complete thing, so I don't have to go back and forth with each one. That's the way I prefer to work. You could extrude, you could make multiple circles on your sketch, extrude all of those sketches, and go through and add all the features. I like working this way. Let the thing do the work for me. Okay, that's pretty much that. Now, one other thing I like to add when I'm doing something like this, because water would still get trapped underneath this foot, what I can do is I can make one more sketch here. And I'm going to just work on the YZ plane. And I'm going to add a hole right there. I don't know, 10. Make like a little archway here. Cool. Finish sketch, extrude that. I want it to go all the way out, but that's going to chop a giant hole through here. So this is where I can play with, instead of starting at the profile plane, I can start offset. And you know what? Let's see if it starts as an object. Let's try that instead. Starting at object, select there, and then extent to object, the outside. Sometimes I have found that if you try to use the, if you make an extrusion first, if you drag out the extrusion and then change your mind, it doesn't it gets confused. So if you're selecting these options and it's not doing what it should be doing, cancel, clear out of it, start a new one, extrude, select there. Now go redo it. So starting not at the profile plane, but further over. So select here, right there, and then extent on the outside. Still didn't do it. You're making me look like a schmuck. All right, I don't know why I didn't do that. So we'll just have to do it manually. Offset. This just means instead of starting right at the start plane, it's going to start further out, and it is, what the heck? Sometimes it just acts like a jerk. I want you to just start somewhere out there. Why is it doing this way? You know what? Fine. Be that way. We'll just start it differently entirely, you schmuck. Sometimes it does this. All right, you know what? We'll just start an offset and we'll start way the heck out. Somewhere out here. Okay. Extent type, distance. Where is my... Huh. Why is it not doing that? There we go. Weird. It wasn't doing it. I don't know why it wasn't working for me. All right. Now let's try the two objects. So now it's starting out here. Now let's see. No, cut. Why is it acting like this? Clearly something I am or am not doing. That is very strange. Let me try one more time. Yes, I want you to do that. But I want you to start, offset, let's say 50. I don't know why it's doing this to me.
I think it's offsetting like.
There we go. Yeah, it was just offsetting too far, so that's very strange. I'm having to work. I was having to work back and forth. That's irritating. All right, tell you what. Because it was doing a bunch of weird things, let me just kind of skip around a little bit and show you a different way of doing this. I was going to get to construction planes till later, but I'm just going to throw this on. You can choose however you want to approach this. The straight through drainage holes are ample. I'm just trying to show you how to add a little bit more feature. Now, because I was having problems with this, personal problems apparently, you can create additional planes to work from in Fusion. If you go all the way to the right on the top bar here, you have the default is offset construction plane. All this is much like a sketch, like a construction sketch. It is creating a starting working place to build from. So there's a slew of different ones, but all I need is the offset. So the reason I'm doing this is because instead of working from the origin and working out, I want to work away from and go toward the origin. That's all. So I'm going to select, you always have to select a starting plane to work from. So the exact same one I did. And if you have trouble getting at it, hide the bodies, work from there. And now I can just drag this out. I was using like 60 before. That sounds good. Okay. So see this little floating square out here? This is simply the exact same thing as your origin plane, as your origin set. It's just further out. That's all. Just a starting point. All right, let me unhide the body. Same deal. I'm going to delete that sketch that I made just to get rid of it. It's causing me headaches. Start a new a new sketch, and I'm just going to do it on that construction plane. It's still the XY axis. It's just away from, sorry, XZ axis. It's just away from it. That's all. Exact same thing. Make it a circle. 10 millimeters, that worked. Great. Finish sketch. See how now it's floating away from the body. That's all. All right. Same thing, extrude backwards. It changes to red, cutting through. I'm just going to kind of align it so it's in that arc or in that arch in there. Hit OK. There we are. All right, Dunsky. That's all I was trying to do. So just so you have a little place where the water can escape. I can do the same, add a couple little fillets here. I will warn you, adding full rounds here can be problematic. It might actually be better to either make some really tiny ones like 0.1 millimeter, so it's just a tiny bit of round, or not at all. It's up to you, but I just like to round things out. There we go. Same thing. I'm going to add a couple of arches to this pattern, circle pattern, features, selecting those features. Sometimes it's hard to, doesn't want to select sometimes. You have to zoom in sometimes. There we go. Same deal. Axis, Z-axis. Oh my God, not that many. Let's just say 3. So there we go. Same deal, just made some cutouts on the sides. That's it. So sorry for the additional kind of unnecessary complex way around that. It was causing me problems, so a workaround. There you go. All right. That is it. That is my semi fancy little vessel. All right. So let's save there. Drainage. Done. All right. Next thing is the tray. So let's go down, activate the tray component. The original ghosts out, so you can still see it there. Great. I want to create a sketch. Same deal, right on the front, XZ axis. Same. I'm just going to create a tray. I'm going to start with the center. I'm going to start with the top, and I'm just going to use a straight line to go outward. And then from there, I don't want that little line. Got a straight line. If you want, and if this is confusing you, hide the first body or hide the first component, the planter. Now I know my little line I'm working with. If you need, go back and unhide your original sketch. That'll give you some reference point too of your bounding box there. And then from there, I'm just going to use a fit point spline to kind of make a little bit of a curved lip. Maybe I want this to be a little bit deeper. Ooh, there we go. Yeah, that works. So you want to move this around, adjust this plane, or not plane, I'm sorry, adjust this line. That works. Great. Make it double thick. Offset. Now I want to make sure that I'm going out and away, because otherwise I'd be interfering with this and it wouldn't, the original object, it wouldn't work well. So yeah, -3, that works nicely. That's out. 3 millimeters, perfectly fine. Close the sketch. Center here, straight on down. That works. And then for over here, you know what? This time I will use that circle. We'll use 2-point circle. 1 point starts, the other point ends. Boop, that closes the sketch. And let's trim away that chunk in the center so that doesn't interfere later. There we go. Okay. Simple. Just a half of a profile of a dish. Revolve, select that profile plane, or that profile, sorry. Now my axis, boop, makes a simple little dish. That's all. Looked okay. Now to bring everything back in proper view, go up to the top, activate the whole project. There we go. If you want, I can now select, if I want to apply appearances to this, I need to switch back to appearance mode. So press Shift, November, bring up the appearance tool, Apple, and I can click into, if you haven't played with this before, you've got a whole mess of stuff you can drag and drop on. This works by bodies and components. There's only one body on each of these components, so same deal. I don't know, make it glass, sure. Smooth, textured, all of that stuff. Color, ooh, pretty. Blue, drag and drop, bam, blue glass bottle or glass thing. And just because we can, let's, palladium, sure. Why not a polished palladium base? Because let's get just extra friggin' fancy. Okay, there you go. You don't have to do this. This is just something to start playing with. But there you go. So that's pretty much the project, isn't it? Two different components. The planter and the dish. So you got a place for water to drip to. Needs to be about 100 millimeters by 120, somewhere in there. You could be 100 by 100. That's perfectly fine. Appearances are optional, but it does need to have drainage holes in it. And the idea being that if I hid the tray, this would not be a weeble wobble of a dish. It would actually not wobble over because it has a little foot. You could even have created this as if you wanted like standalone feet. Instead of revolving all the way around, you could do a partial revolve, round those out, and then use circle pattern to create little tiny feet like it's a cauldron. That works. You can cut holes in the sides of all of this. In point of fact, if you want, show you real quick. Keep playing with this whole thing. Let me shift back over to auto color. Let's do a doodle. Create sketch on the front here. And this is creating on the XY plane. And I don't know. Sure. Let's use an oval. I'm mousing over on the major axis here. Now, as I mouse up and down, you see that happened to bring up that little, the crosshair switched over to an X or in a crosshair, and that little triangle appeared. Triangle is the constraint for midpoint. That is showing a midpoint between the top and bottom. So sure, why not? Oval or ellipse, drawing somewhere up and then somewhere out. Cool. So that is floating on right in the center in that major axis. Finish sketch, extrude the hole to do. And I can just go ahead and drag that outward. Bloop, chops a hole in the side. This could even be like some kind of doodle. If you want, that could even go back, edit sketch, and tell you what, let's hide the body there. Yeah, no. And I don't know, maybe draw like a little doodadery on the side here. Whoop. I don't know, frog eyes, sure, whatever. Okay, that's gonna be a terrible idea. Whatever. Okay. Just if you wanted like a more of a featured thing. Unhide the body. Hit extrude. Select all of those. Drag it straight outward. Make a little cutout. Now, of course, that's a giant hole and not a good idea at all. But from there, you could continue to use this pattern tool into oblivion. Select that feature of the hole. Come on, let me select it. There you go. And I could make multiples around the center axis. And that is how you would make a multitude. Let's try more, see if I can make this just a mess. Make a whole bunch of holes on the sides and basically create a barely there vessel if you want. Totally up to you. There's ways of taking this way further by splitting this up into major chunks, but we're not going to deal with that right now. We're going to focus on finishing this out, make it a compatible project that we can then print. So, okay. Unhide all of that. And there you have with all kinds of additional features. And now I've completely negated the functional aspect of this. This wouldn't hold anything. So, you know, maybe not. There you go. You can always back up. Don't have to print it as is. Save. Done. All right. And I will pause there for completion. Okay, so I did want to address one quick thing. In case you did not create your components beforehand, it's very simple to now separate objects into separate components. So I just made two cylinders. These are solid. These are just representational. I just used the cylinder tool as quick representations. Very easy to now create those into separate components. You can either simply create new components. Now it's trying to create this right now. Empty component, there's nothing there. Great. I can now say like body, drag and drop that in. So I'm mousing over where it says component and now drop that component in there. I'm on auto color. So that blue is not just that it's selected, that is the default color. The other way, select the object, make sure that's actually the whole body. Now go to new component. Standard, all of that. Make sure the full project is active. Now because I selected that and created the component with that selection, it automatically pulled that other body into the new component. So it's very simple. Two different ways to do that. You can either literally drag and drop it on once you've created the component on your browser tree, or you can select that object and then create the new component and it'll pull it into the new component. Two different ways, same result. Your project, the assignment does have to have your objects, two separate objects within their own component. All right. Okay, so that should finish it out. Two components, got drain holes. I went a little heavy on the drain holes, and obviously I added way too much holes in the sides, but as an example, why not go to an absurd extreme? Go back a little bit. Don't need to have those there. But there you go. So that's a little planter vessel with two components, drainage holes in a tray, not tree yet. Little tiny tree. All right. Good luck with it.